I knew something was wrong before I even turned off the engine. It wasn't the sight, it was the sound. A dull, rhythmic thud, metal against structure, followed by a crack that didn't belong to any house that was loved. I stepped out of my car, the Colorado air still clinging to my coat, and that's when I heard it again, a wall giving way. Inside my house. That was the first moment something in me went very still. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, like your space and your life are just extensions of their needs, take a second right now. Hit like, subscribe, stay with me, because stories like this don't start loud. They start quiet, and they end with people wishing they'd listened sooner. I pushed the front door open without knocking. Dust hung in the air like fog. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just drywall particles floating under my living room lights, settling onto furniture I paid for. Tools leaned against my kitchen counter. A coil of extension cords lay across the hardwood floor like veins ripped out and left exposed. A man in a neon vest swung a sledgehammer into the wall between my kitchen and dining area. The sound was final, irreversible. "Hey," I said. He didn't stop. My father stood near the hallway, hands in his pockets, watching the damage like he was supervising a routine errand, calm, almost bored. I said his name once, then again louder. He turned slowly like I was interrupting him. "Oh, you're back already. Already." I looked past him, at the hole in the wall, at the wiring exposed like bone, at the man measuring something on a clipboard that used to rest on my kitchen island. "What is this?" I asked. Dad didn't hesitate. "We're opening the space." I waited. For the rest of the sentence. For the part where he explained why strangers were dismantling the inside of my home. He didn't. "For Natalie," he added. "She'll need room." I felt the words land one by one like small, blunt objects. Natalie, my younger sister, pregnant, always fragile, always urgent. "This is my house," I said. Dad shrugged. Not defensively. Casually. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." That was the second snap. My mother stood near the sink, her back to me. The dishwasher hummed softly like it was trying to drown out the moment. She didn't turn around. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even acknowledge that I was there. Instead, she raised her hand slightly. The worker lifted the sledgehammer again. "Wait," I said. Mom sighed, a long, practiced sound. "They're on a schedule, Lauren." Lauren. Not honey, not sweetheart. Lauren. The version of my name she used when I was being inconvenient. "You started construction in my house while I was gone," I said, without asking me. Dad smiled, a thin, warning smile. "You were traveling." Someone had to make decisions. That was the third snap. I walked toward the kitchen counter, picked up the clipboard. My hands didn't shake. That scared me more than if they had. The papers were clean. Official. Permit numbers. Company letterhead. I flipped to the last page. The signature sat at the bottom. My signature. Perfectly imperfect. Slanted just enough. The flourish on the L copied with obsessive care. Anyone glancing at it would think it was mine. Anyone except me. I felt pressure behind my ribs. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. "Who signed this?" I asked. Dad didn't look at the paper. Natalie handled the details. I looked at Mom. She finally turned around. "You always make things about control," she said. "This isn't about you." That sentence cut deeper than the hammer ever could. I held the paper up. "That's my signature." Mom waved it off like a napkin. "It looks close enough." Close enough. I stepped back, took out my phone. My thumb tapped the number printed on the permit sign in my yard. Dad watched me dial. "Don't," he said quietly. The call connected. "Hi," I said to the woman on the line. "I'm standing inside the property listed on your contract. I need you to confirm who authorized this work." She didn't hesitate. "Sure, let me pull it up." The sound of keys clicking filled the space between us. "Okay," she said. "We have approval signed by Natalie Whitmore." I closed my eyes for half a second. "And the homeowner?" I asked. "That's also Natalie Whitmore," she replied. Dad inhaled sharply. Mom's jaw tightened. I hung up. The house was silent except for the dishwasher. "That's fraud," I said. Dad laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Don't be dramatic." Natalie's name sat heavy in the air. My absence had been used like permission. I looked at the wall again. The damage wasn't symbolic. It was physical. Permanent. "You waited until I left," I said. Mom crossed her arms. "We didn't want to stress you. That was the gaslighting. Clean, efficient." "You didn't want me to say no," I replied. Dad stepped closer. His voice dropped. "You don't get to block family growth over square footage." I felt my shoulders tighten. My sleeve twisted under my fingers until the fabric creased. "This stops now," I said. Mom shook her head slowly like she was disappointed in me. "You've always been like this. Cold. Rigid. Cold." I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had watched strangers break into my home and decided my discomfort was the problem. The worker cleared his throat. Sir? Should we—" Mom didn't let him finish. "Keep going." The hammer rose again. I turned and walked out of the room. Not because I was weak, because I knew something else had just begun. On the porch, my phone felt heavy in my hand. I opened my contacts, scrolled past names I no longer trusted. When I found the one I needed, my finger paused. Behind me, another section of wall collapsed. That was the sound of the last illusion breaking. I pressed call. Inside, my mother said one final thing loud enough for me to hear through the open door. "If you loved this family, she said you wouldn't be doing this." I didn't turn around, because I finally understood they had already decided who I was long before I ever opened my mouth. The attorney's office smelled like old paper and lemon disinfectant. Clean, neutral, nothing emotional about it. That helped. Hannah Brooks didn't offer me coffee. She didn't ask how I was holding up. She took the folder from my hands, opened it, and went straight to the signature. That was the fourth snap. She didn't say anything for a long time, just studied the page, tilted it, ran her finger along the ink like she was reading Braille. Finally, she looked up at me. "This wasn't traced," she said. "It was practiced." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So I'm not crazy." "No," Hannah said calmly. "You're being violated." The word landed heavy, precise, legal, nothing soft about it. She flipped through the documents again. Permits, emails, contractor invoices, dates that lined up a little too cleanly with my travel schedule. "They waited until you were out of town," she added. "That matters." I stared at the edge of her desk. The wood was worn smooth from years of people pressing their palms into it while their lives cracked open. "What does this become?" I asked. Hannah closed the folder. "This becomes serious." She explained it without drama. "No moral speeches, just facts. Forgery, unauthorized construction, misrepresentation of ownership, potential liability if someone got hurt inside my home while walls were missing and load-bearing supports were compromised. Family doesn't change the law," she said. "It just makes people think they're immune to it." That sentence stayed with me. She told me not to confront anyone again. Not my parents, not Natalie, not the contractors. From this point on, she said, we document. We don't argue. I nodded. That was the fifth snap. When I got home, the house felt different, not broken, occupied. The walls were half open like wounds that hadn't started bleeding yet. Plastic sheets hung from door frames. Dust coated everything. Even the light seemed harsher, reflecting off exposed studs and wires. I stood in the middle of it and listened. No voices, no hammers, just silence. I took out my phone and started photographing everything, every angle, every tear, every piece of equipment left behind like evidence someone assumed they wouldn't need to hide. That's when my phone vibrated. Natalie. I didn't answer. Another buzz, then another. Finally, a text. "Why are you making this so hostile?" I stared at the screen. Hostile. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email. There it was. A long message from Natalie sent to our extended family list. A subject line so innocent it made my teeth ache. "Please pray for us." She wrote about stress, about pregnancy complications, about how I had withdrawn support when she needed it most. She didn't mention the wall, she didn't mention the signature, she didn't mention my ownership. She mentioned disappointment, hurt, betrayal. She framed herself as fragile, me as absent. I felt my stomach drop. By the time I finished reading, there were already replies. "I can't believe this, Lauren. Family comes first. You should be ashamed." My phone started buzzing non-stop, messages piling up faster than I could read them. That was the smear. I sat down on the bare floor and let the phone buzz itself tired. Then I remembered Hannah's voice. "Document, don't defend." So I took screenshots, every message, every accusation, every timestamp. I didn't explain myself. I didn't correct anyone. Silence became my shield. The next morning I woke up to neighbors avoiding eye contact. One woman who used to wave every day pretended to check her mail until I passed. Another stared at my house like she was inspecting damage she assumed I deserved. Natalie's story had already settled into the neighborhood like dust. That night, Dad showed up unannounced. He didn't knock. He used his old key. That was the 6th snap. "You need to stop this," he said, stepping inside like nothing had changed. I didn't offer him a seat. "You've embarrassed your sister," he continued. "People are talking." I crossed my arms, felt my sleeve tighten again. "Someone forged my signature," I said. "And you're worried about gossip." He shook his head slowly, disappointed. "You always see things in extremes." That was the gaslighting again. "Same rhythm, same tone. You could have handled this quietly," he added. "By letting it happen," I replied. He leaned in, lowered his voice. "If you keep pushing, you're going to tear this family apart." That was the threat. I met his eyes. "You already did," I said. He left without saying goodbye. An hour later, my mother called. Her voice was soft, practiced. "Natalie hasn't been sleeping," she said. "This stress isn't good for the baby." I waited. "You don't want to live with that guilt," she added. That was the 7th snap. "I'm not the one who forged anything I said." A pause. Then she said it. "You've always been selfish with what you have." The word hung between us. Selfish. I ended the call. That night, Hannah emailed me. The county had been contacted. An inspection was scheduled. I didn't feel relief. I felt calm. Because when systems step in, emotions stop mattering. The inspector arrived 2 days later. He was polite, efficient, neutral. He didn't care who was pregnant. He didn't care who felt hurt. He cared about permits and safety codes. He took one look at the exposed supports and frowned. "These changes aren't approved," he said, "and some of them are dangerous." He issued a stop work order on the spot. When Natalie found out, she called me screaming. "You did this on purpose," she yelled. "You're trying to ruin me." I held the phone away from my ear. Let her burn herself out. When she finally paused, I said one thing. "Don't contact me again." She laughed bitterly. "You don't get to cut me off." I hung up. That was the 8th snap. That night, I sent Hannah everything. The emails, the texts, the posts, the voicemails. She replied with a single sentence. "This pattern works in your favor." For the first time since I came home, I slept. Not because things were over, but because I knew they were no longer pretending to be something they weren't. The illusion was gone. And once that breaks, there's no going back. By the end of the week, my name no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the story Natalie told. I learned that the hard way when I walked into the grocery store and the cashier, someone who used to ask about my work trips, didn't meet my eyes. Her smile froze halfway. Her fingers moved faster than necessary. People don't confront you when they believe a lie. They punish you quietly. I paid. I left. I sat in my car longer than I needed to. That was the 9th snap. The posts kept coming. Natalie didn't scream. She curated. Photos of folded baby clothes, captions about learning who really shows up, quotes about forgiveness that never mentioned accountability, comments filled with heart emojis and prayers that landed like stones. Someone tagged me. "Maybe you'll understand when you're a mother." That one lodged deep. I didn't reply. At night, I sat at my dining table, the part of the house that was still intact, and scrolled with clinical focus. Screenshot, save, timestamp, folder after folder. My phone felt heavier each hour. Hannah called on Friday. "Good," she said when I told her I hadn't responded. "Let them talk. They're destroying my reputation," I said. "They're documenting motive," she replied. "That's different." I closed my eyes. "You're not fighting a person," she continued. "You're building a record." That was the 10th snap. The next escalation came through my job. An email from HR. Polite, neutral, concerned. A friend of the family had reached out. Raised questions about my emotional stability given recent events. Suggested my frequent travel might be avoidance. I forwarded the email to Hannah without comment. She replied 10 minutes later. "Do not engage. Save it." I stared at my screen. When family wants leverage, they don't aim for your heart. They aim for your income. That realization burned clean. Saturday morning, Dad showed up again. This time, Mom was with him. They stood on the porch like a united front. No anger, just disappointment weaponized. "We need to talk," Mom said. "No," I replied. Dad's jaw tightened. "You don't get to shut us out." "I do," I said. "On my property." Mom sighed like she was tired of raising me. "Natalie is being humiliated," she said. "People are asking questions." "Good," I replied. That shocked her. Dad stepped forward. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm surviving it." Mom's voice hardened. "You've always needed control." There it was again, the old script, the familiar rewrite. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. Dad noticed. His face changed. "That's unnecessary," he said. "So was forging my signature," I replied. Mom's eyes flicked away. "Stop being dramatic," she said. That was the 11th snap. I ended the conversation by stepping back inside and locking the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home felt final. That night, Natalie emailed me directly. No subject line. Paragraph after paragraph of accusation, blame, moral outrage. She said I had forced her hand, that Dad had only been helping, that I was cruel enough to involve the county. She ended with this: "You're going to regret this." I forwarded it to Hannah. She responded with a single word: "Excellent." The county inspector returned on Monday. This time he brought someone else. Clipboards, cameras, measuring tools. They didn't ask how anyone felt. They asked who submitted the plans, who paid the initial fees, who authorized structural changes. They noted discrepancies, missing approvals, load-bearing walls altered without reinforcement. One of them shook his head. "This could have collapsed," he said quietly. That sentence echoed longer than it should have. A formal stop work order was posted on my front door. Red. Official. Impossible to spin. Natalie's posts changed tone that afternoon, less poetic, more frantic. She claimed misinformation, said contractors had misled her, suggested I had exaggerated risks. Then she deleted 3 posts in a row. That was the 12th snap. The calls started after sunset. Aunts, cousins, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. "Why couldn't you just help her?" "She's pregnant. Your parents are devastated." I didn't argue. I saved the voicemails. Hannah called later. "The pattern is clear now," she said. "Pressure, smear, intimidation." "What happens next?" I asked. "We formalize it," she said, "and we stop pretending this is about feelings." The hearing notice arrived 2 days later. I read it once, then again. A date, a time, my name printed clean and correct at the top. For the first time since I came home, my hands shook. Not from fear, from clarity. Natalie reacted by showing up at my house. She didn't knock. She pounded. "You can't hide forever," she yelled through the door. I stood on the other side, silent. Phone recording, heart steady. "You think the law cares about you?" she screamed. "About your precious walls." I said nothing. "You've always thought you were better than us," she continued. "This is you proving it." That was the 13th snap. She left when a neighbor opened their door. By the next morning, a new post appeared. "I never thought my own sister would abandon me during the most vulnerable moment of my life." Comments poured in, but something had shifted. A few people asked questions. Why were permits involved? Why was the county there? Why hadn't Lauren signed anything? Natalie didn't answer those. She deleted comments instead. Silence. I learned isn't weakness, it's pressure. Mom texted that night. "We didn't raise you to be like this." I stared at the screen. I typed once, deleted it, typed again, deleted it. Then I sent one sentence, "Please communicate through my attorney." Her response came fast. "How dare you!" I turned my phone face down. Outside the house creaked as the temperature dropped. The exposed beams made sounds I hadn't heard before. Honest sounds. Structural. Real. I walked through the damaged rooms slowly, touched the raw edges of the wall. This wasn't just my home, it was evidence. I slept on the couch that night, not because I was afraid of them, but because the bedroom felt too close to everything they'd tried to take. As I drifted off, one thought settled in, sharp and undeniable. They weren't angry because I called a lawyer. They were angry because I didn't collapse. And for the first time, I understood something I wish I'd known earlier. When people lose control over you, they don't ask what they did wrong. They accuse you of changing. That realization didn't hurt. It steadied me. Because I knew what came next wouldn't be loud. It would be procedural, and it would not be kind. The courthouse smelled like recycled air and old carpet. Nothing dramatic, nothing sacred. Just a building designed to remove emotion from conflict. That was intentional. I arrived early, sat on the hard bench outside the hearing room with my hands folded in my lap. Hannah sat beside me, flipping through a binder thick enough to bruise someone if dropped. She didn't look nervous. That mattered. Across the room, Natalie arrived with Blake. Her husband stayed half a step ahead of her shoulders, squared like proximity to authority might change the outcome. Natalie looked smaller than she did online, pale, tired, still defiant. She didn't look at me. That was the 14th snap. When the clerk called our names, the room quieted in that particular way only official spaces can manage. The judge entered. No gavel drama, just papers, glasses, and a schedule to keep. This wasn't personal. It was worse. The judge started with ownership. Hannah stood, presented the deed, mortgage history, tax records, every document clean, every line consistent. This property, the judge said after reviewing them, is solely owned by Lauren Whitmore. He didn't look up when he said it. Natalie shifted. That sentence erased months of manipulation in under 5 seconds. Next came the permits. Hannah handed over the contract. The emails, the payment trail, the handwriting analysis. The expert testified calmly, explained stroke pressure, letter spacing, intentional replication. This signature, he said, pointing, was not produced naturally. It shows repeated rehearsal. Natalie shook her head, whispered something to Blake. The judge raised a hand. "Pregnancy," he said evenly, "does not excuse falsifying legal documents." That was the 15th snap. Then came the financials, bank transfers, shared drafts, messages forwarded late at night. Dad's name appeared on the screen. Not as an observer. As a participant. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, "did you assist your daughter in submitting these documents?" Dad stood slowly. "I was just trying to help my family," he said. The judge didn't respond right away. "When you helped," he asked, "were you aware the property was not hers?" Dad hesitated. That pause was loud. "Yes," he said finally. Mom stared straight ahead. The judge nodded once. "Then your involvement will be reviewed." Dad sat down heavily. That was the 16th snap. The county inspector testified next. He spoke in measurements and load-bearing percentages, in violations and structural risk. At least one wall removed was integral, he said. This created a safety hazard. Natalie interrupted. "I was told it was fine," she said. The judge looked at her. "By whom?" She opened her mouth, closed it. That silence cost her. The ruling came without ceremony. Stop work order upheld. Full remediation required. Costs assigned to the party who authorized the work. Natalie. Additionally, the judge addressed harassment. Screenshots, emails, voicemails, posts, dates, patterns. This court finds, he said, a sustained attempt to pressure and intimidate the homeowner. He looked at Natalie and Blake. For that reason, a 2-year no-contact order is granted. Natalie stood abruptly. "That's excessive," she said. The judge didn't flinch. "Sit down," he said. "Or leave." She sat. The room exhaled. I didn't feel relief. I felt weight shift. Outside, cameras weren't waiting. There were no gasps, no dramatic exits, just people dispersing. Dad didn't speak to me. Mom didn't look back. Natalie brushed past like I was a stranger. That was the 17th snap. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They trickled. Natalie's car was listed online within weeks. Quiet sale. Low price. Blake stopped posting. Dad's loan application was denied. Then another. The county violation flagged his name. Mom stopped attending neighborhood events. Invitations dried up. Conversations shortened. None of it felt victorious. It felt inevitable. Back home, the repairs began. Different crew, different energy. Permits posted visibly, inspections scheduled, everything documented. The walls came down the right way, the supports reinforced. What had been damaged was undone with care. I watched from a distance, not hovering, just present. Megan visited one afternoon, brought coffee, didn't ask questions. She stood beside me in the kitchen now, stripped to studs. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Different," I said. That night, I slept in my bedroom again. The house still creaked, but it sounded honest now. A week later, Mom sent one last message. "I hope you're happy." I read it once, then I deleted it. Because happiness had nothing to do with it. Safety did, boundaries did, peace did. Months passed. The final inspection cleared. The house stood solid, quiet, mine. I bought the adjacent lot soon after. Closed fast, no discussion. Control wasn't a weapon, it was a choice. On a cold morning, I walked the expanded property line alone, frost on the grass, breath visible. I thought about the version of myself who used to explain, to soften, to make space. She didn't live here anymore. I stopped at the edge of the field and looked back at the house. No scars visible now, no exposed beams, just structure. That's what people never tell you about rebuilding. It isn't loud, it's precise. And once it's done, there's nothing left for anyone else to claim. Not your walls, not your name, not your life. The silence afterward was the hardest part. Not the yelling, not the court, not even the betrayal. It was the quiet that followed when there was nothing left to fight. The house settled slowly like it was relearning how to breathe without tension in its frame. New drywall, reinforced beams, clean lines where chaos had been forced through. I walked the rooms every morning with a mug of black coffee barefoot on floors that were finally mine again. No footsteps behind me, no tools waiting to start without permission. That was the 18th snap, the realization that peace feels unfamiliar when you've lived inside intrusion for too long. Natalie didn't contact me. She couldn't. The no-contact order worked the way law is supposed to, unemotional, absolute, indifferent to excuses. I heard about her anyway, through people who thought they were being kind, through sideways comments, through silence where conversation used to be. She sold the car, picked up part-time work she never thought she'd need, complained online about starting over, never mentioning why. Blake disappeared first, deleted accounts, stopped showing up. Men like him always do when consequences stop being theoretical. Dad tried once. A letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single page. His handwriting tight, controlled. "You took this too far. Families don't survive this kind of thing. I hope you understand what you've done." I folded the paper once, then twice, then dropped it in the shredder without reading it again. That was the 19th snap. Mom never wrote. That hurt more than the letter. But hurt isn't the same as regret. The county closed the case 3 months later. Final inspection approved. Violations cleared. Record sealed where it could be. Hannah sent me a short email. "You're protected now." I replied with one word. "Thank you." I didn't ask how she felt about it. I didn't ask if she thought I'd been harsh. I'd learned something important. You don't ask permission to survive. Spring came late that year. I planted trees along the new property line, fruit trees, slow growers, the kind that take years before they give anything back. It felt appropriate. Megan came over one afternoon with gloves and cheap wine. We worked quietly. Dirt under our nails, sun low enough to cast long shadows. "Do you miss them?" she asked, not looking at me. I considered the question carefully. "I miss the idea of them," I said, "not the reality." She nodded, didn't press. That was why she stayed in my life. The house stopped feeling like a project and started feeling like a home again sometime in early summer. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was being taken anymore. I rearranged furniture without explaining why. Turned down invitations without guilt. Stopped softening my voice when I said no. At work, I traveled less. Not because I was afraid to leave, because I didn't need to escape anymore. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, I stood on the porch and listened. No hammering. No shouting. No phone vibrating with demands. Just Wayne through the grass. That was the 20th snap, the moment I realized I wasn't waiting for the next violation. I was done being on guard. People ask sometimes if I'll ever forgive them. They ask it carefully. Like forgiveness is a moral requirement. Like distance is cruelty. I tell them the truth. Forgiveness is optional. Safety is not. I didn't cut my family off because I was angry. I cut them off because they showed me clearly, repeatedly, without apology, that my autonomy was negotiable to them. And I don't negotiate my existence anymore. The last time I saw Natalie was in court. She looked at me then like she was seeing a stranger. She was right. The woman who used to explain herself was gone. The woman who thought love meant endurance was gone. What remained was quieter, sharper, harder to manipulate, and much harder to erase. I wake up now without a knot in my chest. I make decisions without running them through anyone else's expectations. I live inside my life the way a person should, fully authorized. That's the thing no one warns you about when you finally draw a line. You lose people. But what you gain is something they never offered you in the first place. Peace. And once you have it, you don't trade it for blood, for history, or for anyone who only loved you when you were easy to control.